Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is the panel called Navigating Longer Lifespans. I'm Jaime Ho from the Straits Times in Singapore. To all of you watching the stream, thank you for tuning in as well. I'm going to kick things off very quickly by introducing this very distinguished panel in front of you. I have Martine Ferland, CEO at Mercer, Gori, President and CEO at Manulife in Canada, Dubravka Šuica, the Vice President for Democracy and Demography at the European Commission. My favorite title, by the way. It means you cover just about everything between democracy and demography. And Nancy Ip, President at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I'm going to do a few things. First, let me frame our discussion today. I think we'll hope to dive into the impact and opportunities in the, quite admittedly, unprecedented demographic shifts we are seeing in almost all our societies. And then also, I hope to talk about the changes that we'll need to find in the balance between the financial, the social, and the health implications of these changing population trends. Before that, I'll also make a shout out to the WEF's recently issued report called Longevity Economy Principles, the Foundations for a Financially Resilient Future. I've had a read. I encourage you to have a read as well. As far as the way this panel is going to go, I will start with questions for each of our panelists. And after that, I'll open the floor to questions. So please keep in mind the opportunity that you'll have quite quickly in this panel. The first question I'll have is for Roy to sort of frame everything for us and do the work for us. Can you frame for us the overall longevity challenge? And what do societies and businesses especially need to do in considering right now? What are the next steps we need to think about?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you, Jaime, for convening such an important panel on a really critical topic that I think we all need to really grapple with. And it's an honor to be part of such a distinguished group up here on stage. I think just to frame the issue, I would say that, people are definitely living longer, but they're not living more healthy. They're living less healthy lives, although longer. If I can give you just a few data points to help support that thesis. In 1950, the average American lived to about 65 years of age. And today, the average age of an American is, in terms of their lifespan, is about 81 years. So living much longer. But the unfortunate reality is that it's expected that 20% of the average human being's life will be lived in illness and with health problems and challenges. That poses a phenomenal challenge for the global economy and certainly for society in general. There are some reasons for that. But before I talk even about the reasons, just very quickly, why is that a big challenge for society? Firstly, ill health costs the world globally $12 trillion every year. And people living longer also represents a burden. Today, the retirement gap, the difference between what people need to live in retirement versus what they currently have planned for savings is about $70 trillion. By 2050, that gap grows to $400 trillion. And that is not a problem that's being tackled right now. There's some big reasons why people are living longer but less healthy. And the key reason for the longevity improvement is A, the advances in medical science, but B, the advancements in the industrialization of food production, which has definitely been a big plus for helping people get out of poverty and for creating nutrition for vast majority of the population. But it's also come with severe consequences. And the reasons why people are actually living less healthy lives are a function of 1, nutrition, 2, sleep, 3, stress, and then finally the medical system. And if I can just quickly touch on each of those. From a nutrition perspective, the problem that we have is we've got these ultra-processed foods. 60% of the US diet is ultra-processed foods, and that is directly contributing to illness. Unfortunate reality is that 70% of the children's diet is ultra-high processed food, which again has a high correlation with longevity and health span. The second issue is around mental health and stress. And there is a direct correlation between social isolation and loneliness to health span. And what I can tell you is that loneliness is as bad for your health span as smoking is. And again, the reality is that 1/3 of the population above the age of 45 is currently declaring that they are living in social isolation and in loneliness. So that's a secondary problem. The third problem is around sleep. People aren't having good sleep patterns. And again, here you can improve your lifespan by 5 years just simply by sleeping 7+ hours every day, not requiring any medication to sleep and actually doing that regularly. And then the final thing I'd say is that the health system is geared towards reacting to a problem rather than preventing the problem. And that's, again, contributed to people living longer but not necessarily living in better health. There's some solutions to that, but I'm sure we'll get into that into the later part of the discussion.
Well, it's a sobering start. Thank you very much, Roy. I'll also say that if any of the panelists want to address questions to each other and to Roy, please do so at any point in time as well. Martine, turning the floor over to you. Roy's painted a good broad picture, but talk to us about what this means for the workforce and what role do employers have in addressing what obviously is going to be a multi-generational workforce.
Yes. Thank you, Roy. I feel like I need to move a little bit here. Have I slept well enough? First of all, let me say I've been focused on this topic as an actuary. Demographic is destiny. We know that we're an aging population. Even developing countries have declining birth rates, and we will be seeing global populations start to decline somewhere in the lifetime of my grandchildren. And it's real, and it's big risk. It's pervasive to workplace and health and care, the care economy. It's everywhere in the human life, in society. And I'm delighted that we are talking about this and that the WEF is taking this topic seriously and fronting. As you said, the report is framing it with 6 principles that we could act upon, because it's health, but it's also, you can't fund a 50-year retirement in 40 years of work. So there's many different aspects, living longer lives. How do you live such a long life? How do you organize yourself? So you're talking about workplace and employers and what can they do? I think they can do a lot. I always say it's, first of all, we need to shift the mindset. As you said, it's not very long ago, the life expectancy of an American could have been around 65. So we have that in our mind, that we need to retire at 60 to live a few years in retirement. But the reality is, and worse in ill health, but might not be either, and you have many, many years to fund. So there's a financial aspect to it. There's a productivity aspect to it, as the percentage of people over 65 in our populations, in our developed country populations, will more than double in the next 20 years, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on the country. I think it's very quick for Singapore in particular. So employers can help in that mindset shift. Employers can help in not seeing, like, combating ageism by looking at people over 50 and not seeing them as nearing the end of their working productive life, and continuously provide training opportunity, making sure that the health and retirement program do facilitate later retirement age or phased retirement, health that is adapted to different cohort. We have many different generations that have different needs in the workplace. Living healthy starts early. You can't wake up at 75 and say, oh, I'll start being healthy. No, it's probably too late by then. So I think with the health programs that are offered by large employers, mid-sized employers, we can come back to smaller employers and what can they do. But I think employers can contribute quite a lot. And then adapting the work itself to get the experience of these workers that we will all need. Because if we want to have good service in 20 years, we'll need to have the people to deliver them, plus maybe a robot or two and generative AI, which I think will be critical to continue to have thriving economies and thriving population and human beings. But if you can look at all these facets, all these dimensions, it's something that employers can help progress.
Dubravka, I'm going to turn to you now. I mean, we've spoken in quite nicely broad terms, but maybe we go a little bit more specific now. Talk about Europe. Europe, like Asia, in parts will form part of the epicenters, several epicenters of aging societies. Tell us how you look at it in terms of governance and what do governments need to do.
First of all, thank you for your question, but first of all, I want to thank you for organizing such a panel, because I think it's very timely. The reason why we have first time ever established a portfolio in European Commission on democracy and demography is this very idea not only of longevity, but of declining birth rates and different patterns. So President von der Leyen was visionary enough to establish a completely new portfolio. People started asking me 4 years ago when we started this mandate, what does democracy have to do with demography? My very plain or simple answer was demos. Everything is about people, everything is about citizens, be it on democracy, be it on demography. But what we realized after we made our first ever report on demographic change, we realized that we Europeans, similar to Americans, live 10 years more in last 5 decades. We realized that the longest life expectancy is in Spain, and the shortest is in Baltic countries, in Lithuania, Latvia. Different reasons for this, but I won't talk about biology. So it is very important to see what are we going to with these extra years which we gained in last decades. So you know that until now we somehow structured our lives in 3 phases: education and training first, second working time, 34, 40 years, and retirement. Now it's not any more sustainable. We have to change this not only narrative, but also mindset. So since all of you are talking about aging is it's a big achievement, I think, aging. At the same time, big challenge for member states, big challenge for governments, big challenge for pension systems, for banking, for everyone. So what are we going to do with this aging? So we are now trying to change the narrative to be more positive. So we are not talking anymore about Europe as aging continent, but Europe as longevity continent, because it's much more positive, and there is much what we can do if we work together. Of course, it's not only European Commission, it's not only 27 governments. We have to work together with different stakeholders. Like here, we have to talk with the private sector, we have to talk with civil society. We have to work together on this if we want to improve our longevity. When I started working on this, first we did a green paper on aging. And what we in fact adopted is that we talk about whole life cycle. So we understand that we start aging from the day we are born. So this is very important. So how are we aging? Do we expect healthy lives after 60s or 70s? Depends on how you spend your life during whole lifespan. So it is very important to change mindset, to educate parents, to educate our whole society. So it is about changing mindset. And we as policymakers, we are trying to understand, we are trying to anticipate the trends, and this is what we are doing in my portfolio. But it's much broader than what I can say in 2-3 minutes.
Thanks, Dubravka. I like the narrative that we are talking about, changing the narrative, and this is a good start. Nancy, Dubravka said she wouldn't speak about biology, so maybe I'll turn to you to talk about the biology. You are an expert in neurodegenerative diseases. But bring it down now to the individuals, and how must individuals start thinking about their longer lifespans, as Roy has already alluded to?
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to join the panel and offer the perspective of a scientist. So, you know, in recent decades, we see a surge in the life expectancy. I think it's in part due to breakthrough advancements in medicine, public health, and also an increasing awareness of the importance of lifestyle choices. And so as we talk about longevity, I don't think that we talk about just adding more years to our lives, but we're talking about adding life to our years. So because as we age, actually we are more vulnerable to age-related diseases such as neurodegenerative diseases. And I take Alzheimer's disease as an example. 1 out of 2 individuals aged 85 or above is likely to be afflicted with the disease. And with the aging population, by 2050, it's estimated that the number of Alzheimer's disease patients will exceed 100 million globally. So, so again, in terms of extended lifespan, we need to ensure that, it is marked by vitality, marked by cognitive clarity, and also the ability of the elderly to make meaningful contribution to the society. So again, I mentioned the importance of science and technology breakthroughs. Indeed, the advancements have already made contributions to, improve the life conditions. And for example, we have regular health tests that tells us, what is the health condition of that individual, so that health management can be better, and disease perhaps can be prevented. And we also know that for neurodegenerative diseases and other diseases, actually there is genetic contribution. There's also environmental contributions, for example, lifestyle. So all these scientific studies and all these analyses, actually, I think they're so important. And they already found certain key risk factors for neurodegenerative diseases, such as hypertension, obesity, depression. So all these really provide very valuable information for us to navigate the complexities of aging, of the aging brain. So, if there's one thing that I think we all should do, is to prioritize brain health, because brain is the command center of our body. So it is very important for us to really give that a priority. So if we prioritize brain health, it really means that we're going to embrace a lifestyle that will support cognitive function, that will reduce the risk of neurodegenerative diseases, which is an age-related type of disease. So I would advocate for that, and I think it is very important for the communities, for the government to really invest resources and education, so that we can have brain health for all as our priority. So that's just my comment on this topic.
Excellent points, Nancy. I think we've made actually quite good ground in sort of framing the conversation through the first 4 interventions that we've had. I'm going to open the floor now to you guys. Yeah.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Eduardo de la Mayora, founder of Betterfly. So maybe a question about, so today in the US, there's close to, a little bit over $5 trillion of potentially mispriced life insurance risk over the last 50 years, right? Because the model has been traditionally static, right? You ask 4 or 5 questions: age, pre-existing condition, man, women, and your age. Sorry, I said that. So going forward, right, AI will allow a dynamic underwriting way to approach this. So how do you see insurance companies unlocking or tapping into these resources, right, and redistribute them to empower people to live healthier lives?
Yeah. Well, this is a great question. I think that's from
directly at you, Roy.
And Martine, if you'd like. Thank you for the question, and I think you're absolutely right. There's 2 things I would say. The first is that insurance companies have this incredible database that spans many years, many different demographics, many different socioeconomic aspects of society that, quite honestly, we haven't really leveraged to price the risk correctly. I think you're absolutely right. The pricing of life insurance historically has been very generic and a very high level, and everyone gets roughly the same price, with some exceptions. For example, do you smoke or not? But I think we're going to see an evolution where data is going to be used to price more effectively, which actually will incentivize and motivate the right behaviors in a way. The second big evolution that I see in the life industry that we're trying to lead is to create more of a aligned interest between the life insurance company and the consumer. And what I mean by that is we're one of, I guess, few industries where we're very aligned to the same goal. You know, we want people to live longer, healthier lives. And guess what? People want to have longer, healthier lives as well. So we're aligned, and we gain significantly. If someone lives longer and lives in good health, we profit from that, and they benefit from that as well. The pivot that we've made in recent years is to incentivize customers for that outcome. So we've launched this program that we call behavioral insurance. In North America, we partner with Vitality. In Asia, we call it Move, where we actually give incentives to the customer if they're embarking on and taking on activities that ensure that they're going to live healthier, longer lives. For example, if you take 10,000 steps a day, you are benefiting yourself and you're certainly benefiting us. And what we do is we'll give you a discount on your premium because you're lower risk for us and you've got a better chance of living longer and healthier. So we started with just steps, but now we've evolved that to sleep because we've got trackers that actually allow us to identify whether you're sleeping. And we know that there's a correlation between sleep. We know that stress levels are also another very highly correlated factor, as is nutrition. So we've been continuing down this path of creating greater alignment, incentivizing the consumer to the behavior that we benefit from and that they will. And I think that's just going to continue and continue. A partnership that we launched recently was with Grail. Many of you may know about Grail. It's an early detection cancer product where, again, you know, we're getting that in the hands of our customers at very big discounts that we're paying for, because if they can identify that they're likely to get cancer or have early stage cancer, the chance of recovery is much, much greater. Or at least the increased lifespan that may come of that improves quite significantly. We had one customer who took on the program, felt very healthy, said, I don't need to do this. We said, look, you know, we really recommend it. You're above 50. It's a good thing to do. They did the test, and it came up that they actually had early stage cancer. By detecting it early, they've increased their lifespan by 10x versus it being detected at a late point, which is way, way too late. So I think your point is absolutely spot on. We need to use our data, but we also need to create these models of aligned incentives that actually motivate customers to live those healthier lives. And we need to do our part by paying them through big discounts on their insurance policies that support that behavior.
Technology is a friend, you know, because you can use technology. You were talking about the ring to capture data and also ingest the data, guide you towards the right place. And from Pierre's conversation, the incentivizing people, the dollars help. It could also be through gaming or accumulating points, or me against Nancy and saying, hey, I've done my 7,000 steps today. Nancy, have you done yours? And I know I do that with my daughter on my Apple Watch. So all of those aspects of life, and I really enjoy this thinking about behavioral and psychology of a change, because it's definitely about change. And my challenge to you all, and you're also you have savings and retirement at Manulife, is looking at that from a financial wellness point of view. How can we help people through these same means to incentivize them to take care of their own financial well-being in longer life? Yeah. Part of it is being healthy, but part of it is also savings.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So Roy, you mentioned about early detection. I think it's so important, especially for neurodegenerative diseases. So, because for Alzheimer's disease, you know, by the time the individuals go see a doctor because of memory issues, it's already too late. They're already in the moderate or advanced stages. So it's very important to come up with technological tools to give us early detection. And that is going to be the trend, I think, for many of these age-related diseases, because, you know, it's no longer, you know, talking about developing developing treatment is about how you can prevent it early on if you have the diagnosis. And so that is exactly the path to take, is to rely on the technology and make healthy aging a reality.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Agree.
That was a great first question. Thank you very much. Anyone else for now? No, very good. Over there, please.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. I have a question about kind of the policy and systems changes that are needed. So these all sound like very North American central examples, but people who live in areas of food deserts have a lot harder time. People living on low wages have a lot harder time getting access to that healthy food. People who work shift work have a lot harder time getting access to that long sleep. Really curious about what kind of policy changes you think are needed to create kind of the systems that enable those behaviors. Thank you.
Good question. Maybe Dubravka, you talk about that.
I may reply for Europe, but it can be, I hope, used for other parts of the world. What we did, there are big differences between rural and urban areas, be it about food, be it about services, be it about different infrastructure. So we adopted long-term vision for rural areas because we realized that 1/3 of Europe 80% of Europe geographically is covered by rural areas, and only 1/3 of population live there. So there is a huge, vast territory for people to go there and live and to spend healthier lives. What we realized is during COVID pandemic, as you know, people tend to go in the countryside and the villages. And then we saw that there are no services there. No services, no schools, no buses anymore, and the most important, there is no broadband internet. So we decided to cover whole Europe, be it islands or mountains, with 5G by 2026. So to have Europe covered, because nowadays it's not anymore where you are. The motto is not where you are, but how well you are connected. And this is about connections, but when I say connections, this is about job creation, this is about teleworking, this is about everything. So we have to install good infrastructure, whatever it may be. It's not only about waterways, sewage systems. I think it's over nowadays, but we have to speak about digital world. So this is, as you know, our two priorities are green and digital. And if we want to promote this, we have to be concrete and tangible and show our citizens that we are serious and that there is enough funding and there is enough European funding in cohesion policy for this. And this generates all this later on, be it food production, be it doctors, hospitals, and this is how we look at this with different legislation. Just to mention, when we were in the first question, we were talking about longevity and adaptation. We have to adapt our legislation to this new longevity, because our legislation is adapted to 65 plus, 70, and that's it. Nobody cares about those 70 plus. So now we are aware of this, and this is the very reason why we established this portfolio, to start anticipating the trends. And I think we will manage to do it, but we have to be followed by others. It's not only by 27 member states in the European Union, but also globally. And this is what we are trying to do with all these different interlocutors.
Can I add a comment? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. And back to the report, there's a good example there about Japan, for example, really leveraging communities to support the work that employers and the public sector can do, and education through the communities, access to cooperative for better food, all of that effort that can be coalesced by people on the ground, understanding the conditions of the people there, and in particular social distance and isolation, which can be quite prevalent in those rural places. So I think that example in the report is pretty interesting to address that.
Can I just add one comment quickly? I think it's an excellent question. It's a really important point. Just a data point to support your thesis. The difference in lifespan between the top 10% from a wealth perspective globally and the bottom 10% is about 30 years. So a 30-year difference in lifespan, depending on whether you're in the top 10% of the world's population from a wealth perspective or the bottom 10%. That's a travesty, and that's a massive issue. And there's no silver bullet to solve that problem. I think there's some great thoughts here, and definitely there's an infrastructure problem. There's a food distribution issue that needs to be addressed. There's also an education issue. I think the biggest issue, quite frankly, is education. And again, when you have financial literacy globally at only 30%, that is fundamentally the biggest inhibitor to folks creating the wealth that will allow them to move out of the bottom 10%. And then secondly, just even general awareness about what it would take to improve your health in general. Again, folks generally have a very poor awareness of what it would take to actually live a healthier life. But this is a fundamental dilemma that's being masked by the averages. You look at the great improvements that we've seen in longevity, but it's masking the dichotomy and the income inequity.
Very good. I'm sorry, I think she raised her hand first. You don't down.
Hi, thank you so much for this panel. I had a quick question. Actually, it's related to your comment earlier about inequality, but also around inequality as it relates to social services, and especially as our society is aging. How are we seeing the public sector adapting to ensure that, as we're thinking about financial resilience, not only on the individual level of being able to age well and have the financial resources to age well, but what does that impact? How does that impact the way that we deliver social services from a public benefits perspective, and how does private sector relate back to being able to support some of those initiatives? Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Dubravka and Martine could help answer that question, and maybe bring in the fact that, I think in many things, sort of public-private collaboration as well is going to be very important, and maybe if you could answer that from that perspective to Dubravka.
Without that collaboration, this wouldn't work. So we have to collaborate, of course, and we have to, as I said, anticipate what's going on. Since I'm talking from a European level, and I don't know whether you're familiar with the Treaty of the European Union, there are many competencies which lie with the member states, not with the European Commission. But we are somehow setting the tone. We are issuing recommendations. Sometimes we are in charge. It depends on that. But it depends whether governments in these countries are capable of coping with this. And this is why I'm saying that demography is connected with democracy, because it's about voting patterns, about who is in governance, whether these local, regional, and national governments are ready to follow this, to cope with this. When we are talking about mindset change, it's about this. Who is going to change the mindset? So if all of us are on board, if not, it wouldn't be possible. And this is what we are trying to promote and to make our people aware of what is going on. I mentioned yesterday geography of discontent. This is also very important to maybe to add to the question of rural areas. People start being, they see themselves as being abandoned, being left behind, nobody cares about that. And then they start not trusting anymore in democracy. And they don't go to elections. They say, who cares? Nobody cares about us. So they don't trust in democratic institutions. So what we have to do to regain trust, rebuilding trust, what is the motto of the whole Davos. So this is what we are trying to do, how to, in fact, change these voting patterns, because then people tend voting populists. I'm not talking about politics now, but just to let you know how this is created. And then those who are in governance are not capable of doing this job, what we are talking about. So it's very important to make our citizens acquainted with what is going on, with trends, with being connected in order to be immediately informed about everything. So then they can adopt better living styles, be it sleeping, be it nutrition, whatever. So it's very complex, can't be replied. So it's sociological, it's psychological, it's philosophical, and it's in the end, everything is about economy and finances.
Yeah, and I think I'm absolutely right. We have to be together to achieve what we need to achieve here. And if I can maybe stop on 3 topics in this respect. Financial resilience, financial education is our key pillars here, because education leads to better health, as you said earlier, and that's definitely something that we can help each other with. For example, at Mercer, we run this review every year of the sustainability, integrity, and adequacy of social retirement systems and provide advice to governments as to how they could improve. One of the key elements here, and back to the rural question actually, is also that we have a large portion of the population that's actually not employed by large employers or mid-sized employers, and the coverage for savings and helping themselves is just not there. So the social system becomes very important, but at the same time, the personal responsibilities of financial education, I think we can definitely work together on that one. The second one is we're seeing that, so the health, I'm so happy that this longevity and this aging conversation has become multidimensional, and health being a key element of it. And what we're seeing, there's a double whammy here, because as the population ages, certain professions also are starting to shrink in percentage of the population. And what we see is that, for example, in Europe, where you have most everywhere universal systems for at least a basic service of health, we're seeing a problem of access, because there's less doctors per people. Back to rural, how do they access it? Good news, we have technology, we have telehealth, we have all kinds of different ways to help ourselves get the access to be better, and also modify the system rather than a treating system, which it needs to be in the ultimate, but in a prevention system. And a lot of that can be done remotely in a way, with technology. And the third element where we can work together, I think, is also in the economy of care. Because as the elderly population will start being larger and larger and larger in proportion to the active working or the prime time working population, if the public system, if the way the regulation, the policies around do not make it relatively easy to access elderly care, then the burden comes back to workers. So I think we can work together, because how many workers are losing productive days for taking care of an elderly parent, not understanding the system, having complicated system, not supportive of giving good care. And it is what it is. In our societies, it's still very much women who will take on that burden. And it's a vicious circle, because then they spend less time in work, or they may actually quit work earlier to take care of an elderly parent, and therefore they'll have problem financing their longer lives because of that issue. So I think the economy of care is something, again, that a public and private partnership can address.
If I may add, sorry, one additional element. Everything is fine, access, but without, you were talking about financial education, but without being digitally literate, they wouldn't be able to cope with all this. They would be able to access, they would be able to work in care because of all this automation. So everything is interconnected. You mentioned vicious circle, but so digital divide becomes a big issue. And of course, digital poverty is not only because they don't have gadgets. It's one element, but another element because they don't have digital knowledge and digital education. So this is why we are promoting lifelong learning, and everything is in this circle. So we have to really think about everything. On care, it's definitely gender issue. As I said, 90% of women are in this sector and only 10% of men, which is unsustainable anymore. And there is a pay gap because of all this, but I don't want to bother with you on this, because we have whole care package, and we adopted also this legislation, just to let you know, in the Commission. Sorry.
That's exactly the point that I want to raise, is that actually higher education can contribute a lot to this. You mentioned about lifelong learning. This is precisely what universities can offer. We can provide flexible curricula that really cater to the needs of these elderly or older adults, so that they have the opportunity to keep learning, and also for those who have the desire to return to the workforce, we can develop courses that can help them to to get reskilling. I think this is something the universities can do and really help to make these meaningful contributions.
Thanks, Nancy. I haven't forgotten that side of the room. I'm sorry, I think we may have just time for one last question. So maybe you, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll be quick, and I apologize. It's a more of a US-based question. But as you probably know, healthcare is the #1 cause for personal bankruptcy in the US. And having gone to all the meetings here about AI and the power of AI and data and listening to all the exciting ways that it can be used for healthcare here in the panel, I'm wondering if you foresee potential for a person to be born someday that's uninsurable based on the data that's collected with all of their predictive value.
Roy, quick one.
Yeah, I'll try to be fast. It's a big question. And I think, firstly, you're right. I think we have an issue that's growing at a rapid pace, quite honestly. And this is where the government-private partnership needs to kick in. I do think that the advancements in technology are going to actually improve the population who is actually insurable. So I think, if anything, the technology and the data that we actually have will create that openness. But there's always going to have to be an infrastructure of support that exists in most countries, I believe. So I don't think that we should, and our goal should be to not let ourselves be in a position where we have anyone that's uninsurable. I think the private sector needs to step up, and if anything, they need to look at greater populations for insurability. I think the data is going to actually help with that. But I also think the advances in technology should actually help us with solving the healthcare problem as well, even if it's just access to healthcare professionals through the use of technologies and devices and remote care. I think that technology is going to be a friend to dealing with the healthcare dilemma more than an enemy. But you're not wrong. I do think that there is a risk that we do see populations become less attractive from an insurance perspective. I think we've got to make sure that we avoid that, or we put even regulation and legislation in place that prevents that.
Thanks very much, Roy. I know there were some of you who couldn't get your questions in. I'm very sorry about that. We ran out of time, but enough time to wrap up. Roy, you started the conversation on a little bit of a somber note. I think through the course of the last 40 minutes, we sort of edged towards a more positive note. So in wrapping up, why don't each of you, Nancy, you start first. Wrap up in 30 seconds why you think we can actually talk about longevity in a positive, optimistic fashion.
Well, I think that, if we want to thrive in our longer lives, we really should focus on nurturing a sharp and also resilient mind through healthy lifestyles. And I do think that it is achievable. I think, again, I do believe that, we talk about this, not just adding more years to our life. We really should add more life to our years. And I think Hong Kong is a very good example. We have the average lifespan of 86 years. And Roy, when you talk about, loneliness, you talk about, depression and mental issues, and also processed food. So I do believe that really those are the reasons why Hong Kong has such a long lifespan. Our healthy diet, and also we have a very strong community network, family network, whereby the elderly, they actually receive a lot of care from their family, so they don't feel lonely. So, when I listen to your remarks, those points came to mind. So this is longer than a 30-second answer, but I do think that Hong Kong really gives a good example how to tackle this challenge and really do well. We have a healthcare system that provides affordable care to all the residents. And I do hope that other countries perhaps can take reference of this, how to pay more attention to preventive care. I think that's the key. And I think that, again, in due time, I'm sure, more policies will be established towards that direction.
Thank you, Nancy. Dubravka?
Cannot agree more. But just if it's true that according to some surveys, those kids who are born today, half of those kids who are born today would live until 100 years, then it's a really big achievement to be celebrated. And I think we have to definitely adopt living habits, and we have to spend the rest of our lives in better health. And I think this is our task to promote. All of us have to promote this. Thank you.
I'm actually quite optimistic, despite maybe some of the negative comments. But
Good.
I think in the space of 70 years, we've increased lifespan by 25%. That's remarkable. That is an incredible achievement in just 70 years. I think the challenge that we need to look head on at is the health span issue and the burden that's going to come with longevity. So I think the first step in that journey is to acknowledge what the issues are, which is, as we've discussed, it's nutrition, it's sleep, it's mental and social isolation, as well as moving from a reactive healthcare system to a proactive one. But I'm quite optimistic that they are solvable, but there is no one silver bullet to solve those problems. I do think that it will be a partnership between public and private that gets us to where we need to go.
And you, final word. Martine.
Yeah, well, I am optimistic because we're talking. When human beings put words to a problem, they usually solve it. It may take some years, but step by step. So naming it, talking about it, elevating the conversation is what makes me optimistic. So,
Well, on that note, very nice note. Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you.